For much of this course, Italy has been an epicenter of art. But in the early 20th century, many young Italians felt that Italy was a political, economic, and artistic backwater. Far from reveling in Italy's past greatness, these self-described futurists deplored what they described as Italy's museum mentality. Their god was motion, and even more speed. As founder Filippo Marinetti put it, this quotation is in your textbook, "A speeding automobile is more beautiful than the Nike of Samothrace." More disturbingly, futurist artists glorified war. There was actually a lot of this in the intellectual era of pre-World War I Europe. Social Darwinists believed that nations, like species, obeyed the law of the survival of the fittest, and many held that the white race was demonstrably fitter than everybody else. Nietzsche's emphasis on passion, on overcoming, on the will to power, all translated for many into a kind of worship of violence, conquest, and power. Some historians believe that these attitudes contributed to Europeans' willingness to be swept into a pretty stupid war and helped spark the initial enthusiasm for that war. I tend to share that view. Even in the years after World War I, some leaders in Europe would extol the virtues of wartime unity and courage, a theme that would attract many World War I veterans to fascism. I'm not going to read this out loud, but I would encourage you to check out this overheated, violent, and provocative prose for yourself. It's in your notes template. It gives a real insight into the worldview that helped produce 2 world wars. Note that women are identified as an enemy. That's actually a common and I think disturbing theme in modernist art, influenced in large part by the writings of Sigmund Freud. You might enjoy Sister Wendy's take on Picasso's women. And here is the futurist homage to the machine. This is one of Futurism's most famous images, although frankly, I think it's a pretty silly painting. You should be aware that the College Board loves to include at least one general multiple-choice question about Futurism. The correct answer almost always includes the words motion or speed. Here are some more speeding objects in motion by the same artist. And here's a slide from our last unit. Do you remember the galloping horses? Futurists, and indeed many modernist artists, were heavily influenced by Muybridge's photographs capturing motion, and they are very popular subjects for the AP exam. So here's another set of Muybridge photos on the same theme of bodies in motion. I do not find this cast bronze sculpture silly, and indeed it was one of the most influential sculptures of the 20th century. You can see the futurist worship of the machine, but also the influence of Cubist art and its exploration of multiple surface planes, volumetric shapes. This is one you need to know, by the way. Many of the futurists volunteered to fight in World War I, and Boccioni was killed in battle. After the war, many futurists would join Mussolini's fascist movement. Severini was one of the founding members of the Futurist movement and a signatory of the Futurist Manifesto that you just saw. I mentioned the Futurist glorification of war. This painting produces what your textbook, I think appropriately, calls a sanitized version of an armored train, complete with sleek cannons and highly stylized troops bearing rifles. There is no blood and gore in this painting, and the colors are disconcertingly bright and cheerful. Now we get to one of the weirdest episodes in art history, the Dada movement. I'm going to introduce it with the first few minutes of a video that captures some of Dada's frenetic and playful spirit and its anti-establishment, in-your-face attitude, literature, and art. The entire videos named the ABCs of Dada, presented appropriately starting with Z for Zurich, where the movement was founded, and moving backwards, is up on Moodle in 3 parts. You might enjoy it. So you've just heard from Hans Arp. In the Dada spirit, he believed that chance should determine his composition. So he cut up papers, dropped them onto another sheet of paper on the floor, and glued the art that resulted. Dada artists adapted the collage method to make political statements with photos. Here's another video clip about photo montage, which includes footage of this artist as an elderly woman still playing with her Dada dolls. Now that you've seen the video clip and have some sense of photomontage, take a closer look at this work. Hotch has included images of her political heroes, it's probably pronounced Hoke, by the way, Marx and Lenin, as well as a map showing where women can vote. She also stuck the heads of German military leaders on exotic dancers' bodies. Here are my snipped and blown up clips of those images. Merz was a syllable from the word Commerzbank, or commercial bank, which showed up in one of the articles. In other words, in the Dada spirit, it was accidental and nonsensical. But by far the most famous Dada artist was Marcel Duchamp, and believe it or not, the fountain, and yes, it is a urinal turned upside down, competes with Demoiselles of Avignon for the title of the most influential artwork of the 20th century. The urinal was one of a group of sculptures that Duchamp gave the name ready-made. Here you see another one, the bicycle wheel. You must know the story of the fountain, but you've already heard of Khan Academy podcast about it, right? The fountain and other ready-mades appear on the AP exam all the time. Here's a 2011 example. Let's hear how Marcel Duchamp sort of answered this question in a 1965 interview with an art museum curator. Then I'll show you what the College Board said. I'm not going to read this, but it's in your notes, and I hope you will. What's amazing about this work, and hard to tell from a slide, is that it's made up of oil paint, wire, and lead foil placed between two large glass panels. So the bride on top, according to Duchamp himself, is basically a motor fueled by love gasoline, okay? It's a little easier to make out male figures in the bottom. The chocolate grinder apparently represents masturbation. I'm not making this up, and neither is your textbook. Duchamp left a whole notebook of detailed notes about this work. This picture of movement shows a kinship with Cubism, Futurism, and also with Muybridge's motion photography. In fact, it may have been based in part on another Muybridge study, this time an early movie. If you Google the name of this painting and then go to Wikipedia, you can see the actual film footage of a nude woman descending a staircase by Muybridge. The Salon des Indépendants, that's where many of the artists we've been studying in this unit introduced their work to the world, the post-expressionists in particular. It actually rejected this painting when it was submitted to their exhibition of Cubist art. The jury thought that the title was too literary and the painting was too close to Futurism. There may have been a political undertone to this decision. The Futurists were seen as right-wing, and indeed many became fascists. The Parisian art scene was for the most part committed to socialism or even communism. This painting generated a firestorm of criticism when it first appeared at the famous 1913 Armory Show in New York City, one of the most important exhibitions in art history. The show introduced American audiences to European artists such as Picasso, Matisse, Braque, Kirchner, Kandinsky, and of course Duchamp. It also featured some notable American artists. So here's a photo of the show being set up in the armory of the New York National Guard's 69th Regiment. Here's a fun anecdote about this show and the Duchamp painting you just saw, another tidbit I picked up from Wikipedia. After attending the Armory Show and seeing Marcel Duchamp's nude descending a staircase, President Theodore Roosevelt, and this is an exact quote, said, "Take the picture which for some reason is called a naked man going downstairs. There is in my bathroom a really good Navajo rug, which on any proper interpretation of Cubist theory is a far more satisfactory and decorative picture. Now, if for some inscrutable reason it suited somebody to call this rug a picture of, say, a well-dressed man going up a ladder, that name would fit the facts just about as well as the Cubist picture of the naked man going downstairs. From the standpoint of terminology, each name would have whatever merit inheres in a rather cheap straining after effect, and from the standpoint of decorative value, of sincerity, and of artistic merit, the Navajo rug is infinitely ahead of the picture." So there you have the presidential view, which is a nice segue into my final topic for this lecture, which is early 20th century American art. In the last unit, we saw paintings by landscapes from the Hudson River School and portraits, landscapes, and genre scenes by American realists and impressionists, such as Sargent and Whistler. America was joining the art world, although it would achieve much greater importance after World War II, when New York City replaced Paris as the epicenter of modern art. This rather gritty painting of a drunk woman and two disapproving middle-class onlookers on a New York City street is an example of the Ashcan School. These were realist painters who had a political as well as an artistic objective. They wanted Americans to confront poverty and then do something about it. Here are another couple of Ashcan paintings, both of New York's Lower East Side. I really like this title, Cliff Dwellers. And this is a street, still a street in New York. Here are some Dada-esque works by Man Ray, who would be a leading figure in the post-war New York art renaissance. More in-your-face art with ready-mades. Aaron Douglas was a Harlem Renaissance artist who illustrated a series of poems entitled God's Trombones by African-American poet and composer James Weldon Johnson, who was also a major figure of the Harlem Renaissance and, incidentally, is one of my personally favorite modern composers. You probably don't have time to play this in class, but the link is to his composition of God's Trombones illustrated with artwork. You can check it out on Moodle. This is probably the most famous work, or rather series of works by a Harlem Renaissance artist, although it was actually produced during the early years of World War II. During and after World War I, millions of African Americans migrated north to find better jobs and to escape legally enforced segregation. I find Jacob Lawrence's images extraordinarily powerful. They're also very popular with the College Board. Here are two more panels from the series. The paintings in the series are very recognizable, and the College Board may ask you to do just that. He's certainly one of the best-known African-American artists. Sigh, still another ism, this one made in America. Like futurists, precisionists were fascinated by machines. They also adapted some of the disassemble, reassemble strategies associated with cubism. I was rather startled to see Georgia O'Keeffe lumped into the precisionism heading in your textbook. She's another one of these artists who I think kind of defies categories, another personal favorite as well. But I suppose this painting does reveal a fascination with New York City, a city she moved to in 1918 from the metropolis of Canyon, Texas. But what Georgia O'Keeffe is best known for are her paintings of the Southwest, where she began in 1929 to spend part of her year painting, and perhaps even more, her detailed, evocative close-ups of flowers. There is a huge debate over whether or not O'Keeffe's paintings are thinly disguised renditions of female genitalia. In 1943, O'Keeffe finally responded to this suggestion, and I quote, "Well, I made you take time to look at what I saw, and when you took time to really notice my flowers, you hung all your own associations with flowers on my flower, and you write about my flower as if I think and see what you think and see of the flower, and I don't." Well, a lot of people still aren't convinced. If you Google Georgia O'Keeffe, most of what you'll get is back and forth on whether her paintings are in fact erotic art. Feel free to check it out. Georgia O'Keeffe was discovered by and later married to the most prominent American photographer of the early 20th century, Alfred Stieglitz. And this is probably his most famous photograph, and it's appeared at least once on an AP exam. Stieglitz rebelled against art photography. He believed in, this is a quote, straight, unmanipulated photographs that caught some important aspect of real life and the world around him. So here's another famous example. I love the way the photo captures the dust being thrown up by the wind and the horse's hooves. And here is one of his relatively few PG-rated photos of his wife, Georgia O'Keeffe. And here's an example of art photography. It shows you how the influence of abstract art was seeping into photography, just as photography had in some ways been an impetus for abstract art. It takes some staring to figure out just what body parts we're looking at. I'm going to break here. In the next lecture, we'll look at how artists responded to the Russian Revolution, the rise of fascism and World War II, and then at the Freud-inspired and truly weird world of the Surrealists.